Hey, ¿qué pasa, Calexico? Welcome back to the podcast. Like always, before we begin, I want to thank a couple of people. I want to thank my anchor sponsors, Camilo and Jake. I also want to thank my sponsors from Roots Creative, Eddie Lopez. Thank you for sponsoring the podcast. Also want to thank Dents on Border. If you have any scratches or dents on your car, make sure you contact Dents on Border. Also want to thank Sergio's Tacos and Hotdogs, serving the Imperial, San Diego, and Yuma counties with Mexicali style hot dogs and taquizas. Contact Sergio at 760-562-0057. And finally, I want to thank David Gastelum. If you're thinking of buying or selling a home in Imperial or San Diego counties, make sure you contact David. He's not only a realtor, but an investor with over 20 years of experience, and he'll teach you along the way one of the most important investments of your life. His phone number is 760-235-9576. Today, I'm really excited to have my guest today because one of the reasons is because I want to kind of nerd out in the, the sharing your using your voice to share information kind of aspect. And the other one is because we're going to talk about a subject that I feel like we don't talk enough. There's times when we do, but then we kind of like forget about it. But I feel that pandemic has really made us, besides everything else, the pandemic has made us aware of, this subject that we're going to talk about has even become a big subject that we need to talk about and address. My guest today is Scott Dudley, and he's the manager for the Imperial County
Behavioral Health Services. I got this. I know where I work.
Yeah, and he's also a host of a public radio show on KXO Radio. Let's talk about it. I'm really excited to have you today here, Scott. Thank you for being here.
Hey, thanks. I'm honored to be a guest. It's so weird to like turn the chairs around and turn the interviewer into the interviewee. I hope I can handle that.
Yeah, I think I've been on 2 other podcasts where I was the person being interviewed, and then I was on this other show for Calexico Rec that they weren't actually interviewing me. They expected me to talk for half an hour about myself, which was kind of
nice.
Weird.
Yeah. That's starting. It's threatening in a weird way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like,
so before we get into the meat and potatoes about mental health and all the COVID and all this stuff, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, okay. So sure. I am 58 and a half years old. Wait, do we have to count the year of COVID or no? Do I get the
you can probably
defer that one or something?
Yeah.
So, okay, 58 and a half, which means like, I was working at the vaccine clinic the other day at IVC, and I was like 3/4 of the way through the day when I realized like, oh, dude, I'm the oldest person here working. Because, it was a bunch of people in their 30s and 40s, and it hadn't occurred to me because, you don't always get up and look at yourself in the mirror and go, whoa, I'm getting old. But so 58 and a half, I was born and raised in Lansing, Michigan, a block away from Magic Johnson, who's a year and a half older than I am.
Oh, really?
And yeah, so I got to watch him play basketball in like junior high and stuff like that. And it was an all black neighborhood. I was raised in I'm Anglo, by the way. You can't see us because we're on Zoom, but I'm like my 23andMe is the boringest 23andMe in the world because it's like 98.7% Northwest European. I don't even get down to France, man. It's like, it's bad. So it's almost, it's all Scandinavian, Irish, and English. And so anyway, raised in an all black neighborhood, block and a half away from Magic Johnson, which really was valuable for me culturally because many Anglo people have no idea what it's like to be a minority. Right. And so and it's funny because I moved here to the Valley, and it really helped me out. Like when I would go down and walk around the ejidos in Mexicali, and I could do that. And sometimes people weren't exactly inviting or friendly, but I knew how to be a minority already because I had experienced that. And it was a valuable part of my upbringing. So, did that, ended up, my parents were divorced when I was like 8 years old. And that's not like a mental health story. That's like part of my story because I became really bi-coastal because my dad was a disc jockey, which brings us back to media. and eventually ended up being a record company executive. So he kind of worked his way up through the chain. And so I was spending summers in DC. I was spending summers. Eventually, he ended up in Hollywood. So I spent all my teenage summers in Hollywood in the mid to late 70s, which was kind of fun.
Yeah.
And which was cool because actually he lived like a block off the Sunset Strip, and he was gone all day because he was a record company executive. He's working. So I was like left like homeless or whatever. He'd give me $20 and say, hey, go to the pier and have fun. And so, but I got to be really close to the LGBT community as well, which was kind of cool. Again, another minority situation where, I was this straight white boy from Michigan, and in the late 70s is disco, and there was a real coming out in that part of West Hollywood. And I was there right in the middle of it. And so I had to kind of like figure that out and figure out who I was and be okay with everything like right away. And I was able to do that. So anyway, graduated from Michigan State with a degree in education, ended up out here by some weird fates and chances, stuck here, got out of education because I felt like it wasn't living up to its promise to children. I know that's kind of a heavy thing to say. And I know that people in education try really hard, but I really felt like there were too many kids coming from marginalized backgrounds who never really had a chance, really smart kids. But because of culture, because of the system, because of the way things were set up, they weren't going to be successful. And that was just too hard for me to carry. So after a couple of years of teaching, I was like, you know what, I'm getting nightmares about this. I don't want to be a part of this. I sent my certification back to the state of California with a letter saying, you know what, dude, I cannot be a part of this. This is just not healthy. But in the meantime, I made some contacts, and ultimately I ended up working in student well-being with the Office of Education. Made some more contacts. And then when that grant ran out, they called me from a mental health program called Vista Sans. And Vista Sans was, it still is, a school for elementary age kids who are having kind of behavioral problems in school. And they called me up for an interview as a referral from a friend. And I went into the interview. I said, look, if you're looking for some prison guard to browbeat your kids, man, I'm the wrong guy. I don't do that. And they said, okay, you're hired. And I was like, cool, I'll do this. Anyway, I fell in love with it. Ultimately, if you think about it kind of in the challenging aspect, we had the 15 most behaviorally challenged kids in any school district. So not just in the classroom, not just in a school, in the entire school district, in our class, 4 hours a day for 6 to 9 months for each kid. And I loved it. I was home. I really felt like I could give these kids some keys to empower their own lives. I felt like I could support their families in ways to get their situations better. And ultimately the schools liked us because, the kids started conforming to kind of the expectations of school. And it was a really good time. I would have, if they kept giving me more money, I would have done it forever. I'll be honest. I'd still be doing it. I'd go out and play soccer for a half hour a day in 110 degrees. It was great. I loved it. But eventually, they stopped giving you raises. And so you got to go, okay, well, I'll apply for that supervisor job. I'll be the analyst in charge of training. I'll do all sorts of other gigs. And so I made it up into management. And then that's why I was like, okay, Peter Principle, you can only rise to the level of your incompetence. So I'm stopping now. I'm not going to push it. So I didn't want to be a therapist, oddly enough. It's like, I feel like I'm an art critic. I can't paint, but I can look at a painting and tell you if it's good. Mm. And so I didn't want to be the guy who said to somebody else, you've got major depression. It's a lifelong infirmity that you are always going to struggle with. You have a higher risk of suicide and you'll probably die 20 years before your life. I didn't want to be that guy. That's not who I am. I'm more like the magic guy. I'm more like, if you snap your fingers and click your heels 3 times, you can be whoever you need to be. Yeah. So that's who I am. And I'm now the manager of outreach and engagement, which is a good, I'm a good hype guy. It works. Also the manager of the training department. So that's good because that kind of allows me to, keep some of my, hey, let's do this. It's good for the department's, vibe going on. And as you mentioned, I've been hosting a weekly radio show for 18 years.
Wow, that's crazy. That's crazy. Because I've been doing this for 3 years, and it's like, it seems like I go back and listen to some of my old stuff, and I was like, man, I've been doing this for so long, and 18 years. Wow, that's crazy.
You've gotten better, right?
Oh, I think so.
my old stuff is scary.
Yeah, I think I've gotten better. I mean, I still do the ums and the but it's just,
I do less of them.
Maybe when 15 years from now, maybe I'll do a little bit less of them. But yeah, like it's crazy, and I know that there's more than one show that the county puts out, right?
Yes, we put out a Spanish language show called Exprésate.
Okay.
As well. I even got to host that a couple of times, much to my chagrin, because it's hard enough to do like professional good media in your chosen language, but then to try to do it in the flip language is double challenging. And while I speak Spanish, my Spanish is much more casual because I didn't learn it in school. I learned it in the swap meet.
Yeah, you know what? I've done stand up a couple of times, and I've done it in English. And one time I went to Mexicali and tried to do stand up in Spanish, and I did the mistake of trying to translate my English set into Spanish, and it didn't work. So,
I want to credit for my Spanish. One of the primary inspirations for me was Cantinflas.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Cantinfliando, right?
Yeah.
I would watch the DVDs like over and over. I'd stop and rewind it, and rewind to 15 seconds of his take on something, and go, what is he trying to say? How does that work? And it was really insightful. I loved it because it helped me when I would go out, on the street in the community and speak Spanish, because that was much different Spanish than the Spanish that was being spoken, in more formal settings.
Mm-hmm. And going back to, you mentioned that your dad was a disc jockey. Was that something that you, something that maybe you had in mind to do in the future growing up, or just happened?
You're right. Did I aspire to it? That's a good question. I was always, I think once you get over your fear of public speaking, you get thrust in that role. So I never really sought to be like spokesperson. And part of this media gig is your ability to be that spokesperson. However, it doesn't scare me. And I take the responsibility very seriously. So you got two things. One is you have to stay grounded, and you have to kind of be aware of what you're doing. And then two is you have to use your professional skills to put that into a platform. And, as I practiced that, and as I felt more and more comfortable with it, it just started falling into my lap more. And the more it falls into your lap, the more you're like, oh, okay, I can do keynote. Okay, I can stand. The year before last, I stood up in Southwest High School and did like a 45-minute standing speaking gig to 600 high school students twice, like because it was half the school body. So I did like one, and then I did it again, and it was okay. I don't think they didn't run up and ask me for autographs again, but I kind of didn't expect them to. But it felt good, and you could kind of see some of the people vibing to it in the audience where the lights were, where you could see them, and so you do what you can. You take your gifts and bring them and push them into the world, right? Yeah.
And to me, I don't think it was something that I really wanted to do, but I grew up watching a lot of like late night, Jay Leno or David Letterman or Craig Ferguson, and I always liked just like the conversation and the banter they had, and I think like this is allowing me to kind of do the same thing that they used to do. And what I enjoyed from watching them, conduct interviews and stuff like that. But I feel that, something that what you do, which is, more serious, you're putting out information that's more serious. It's kind of, you need to be a little bit more prepared, but at the same time, not take yourself too serious, right?
Well, okay. So the couple of interesting things in doing the radio show. One is, I know a lot about mental health. I've the last 30 years working in it. I finished one class short of a master's. When I decided not to be a therapist, I burnt the bridge. I stopped one class short of my degree. And then I was like, oh, dude, I don't got no advanced degrees. I feel a little inadequate here. So I went back and I got a master's degree and a PhD in religion. So I'm actually a doctor, but I don't like claim that on the radio. But I know a lot about mental health, but as an interviewer, I cannot let my knowledge get in the way of what the person knows. So it can help inform what question I might ask next, but I can never step into their spot and say, well, how about this really good cognitive behavioral intervention? Would that work? Because it's too leading.
Yeah.
So the background kind of helps you balance that. So as an interviewer, it's all about the next question, and it's all about keeping the listener in your head, right? It's like you want the listener to be saying, what would the listener want to know right now? And that's what they're asking me in my head. That's guiding the interview.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get that. Where you're like you're listening to yourself, in your car or somewhere, like even like right now when we're having this conversation, I'm kind of like listening to, projecting myself, listening to this podcast in my car or whatever, just to see if it's something that people are going to continue listening or tune out.
You mentioned funny. Funny is an interesting, I was never going to be a stand-up comedian. I can't, for the life of me, I can't get jokes, just get away from me. So, but the trick is, we would always have a running gag on the show that if it's a show about depression, it's depressing. And we always realize that a listener is a button click away on the radio, a button click away from going away. And so if you get in there and you're all bumming people out, even if it's important stuff, it's you can't be that. So all of a sudden now I've got a show about teen suicide, right? Something really awful, really serious, really scary, make you swallow. And somehow we've got to keep an engaging, inviting, right on the edge of humorous tone and quality of our banter, of our speaking, to keep the listener engaged. And you're right, that can be kind of tricky.
Yeah.
And that's where I think if there's anything like a developed skill over time, I think we've gotten better at kind of knowing how to hold that edge and to try to keep people engaged, but not have it such a dry, scary, awful, boring show that people just click away from it. Mm-hmm. Because there's really good information in the show. Yeah.
I've that's something that I try to do a lot before I talk to my guests, especially when somebody that has some content out there, that I try to listen and do some research on the person, just so that I can have a conversation flowing. And yeah, like I was listening to the stuff and I was actually listening to the one with Devin Apodaca.
My boy Devin.
Yeah, I had him on the podcast as well.
I told him I was going to rebroadcast him, and he says, well, I can't that week. I'm busy. I said, you don't understand. I'm just going to replay your show. I own you now. I can put you on whenever I want you.
Yeah. When I talked to Devin, because I was listening to while we were recording, I have my headphones and I listened to him, and he has a voice, made for radio. I mean, he has like really deep voice that.
Don't you envy those people?
Yeah. It's like, man, this guy has the voice.
Just make me want to talk like that right now.
Yeah. So how did the show start? Were you one of the creators or? Okay.
So way back in the day, there was a youth show that was done out of and KUBO, if you're familiar with Cuba.
You know what? I used to go there and do like public radio sometimes.
At the little place like south of El Centro or east of El Centro?
The one I went to was the one by Evan Hughes. It was like a...
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So that was like Little House on the Prairie. That was where it all started, because what we would had is the equivalent of a community service worker going there and interviewing groups of kids. And it was in Spanish. It was a Spanish show mostly. And so that show was kind of hopping along on Cuba when it was like, you know what, let's take it a step farther. And KUBO was really the vehicle by which this all happened. So when we came aboard and said, you know what, let's do Expressate, we'll do talk radio about mental health topics. and we'll do one in Spanish and we'll do one in English. Maria Wyatt and I were the original English ones. So, way back, what? It's interesting because recently elected El Centro Councilwoman Martha Singh was one of the original Spanish ones.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Way back. She still looks the same. She hasn't changed a bit, But it was her and I think it was Raquel Villa even back. No. It was another woman. Her name escapes me. She went on to be a counselor over at IBC. So those two were the original Spanish ones. Maria and I were the original English ones. And we were all chosen for our verbal abilities, right? I mean, it's important.
Yeah.
Our kind of cup of coffee energy, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I remember our old director, Mike Horn, once described it. Well, you guys are just a little bit like type 2 manic. You've got this energy, you've got this push to you. And that works on radio. And I was like, well, not true, but I'll take it. So we started back then. And we did not record at Little House on the Prairie very long until we moved to KUBO downtown.
Yeah.
In El Centro. We recorded there forever.
Yeah, I remember going to the one downtown as well. I used to go with Frank Salazar.
Yes, yeah. I remember.
I used to go with him and do. He used to have like a Sunday night show where it was like emo music, like 80s
Sure.
new wave music. And I used to go hang out with him then. And then I remember he kind of introduced me to, I think it was that group of high school kids that would talk about mental health issues.
Yeah.
And we would just hang out. I was never on the air with them, but I came in a couple of times and saw that. But yeah, I do remember Google. Like, yeah, it was funny.
I had a Sunday night show there for a while when they were already in downtown El Centro. And that was like, what was scary was you get so much more interaction on the radio show when you were playing music. People be lighting up the phones and that was kind of cool.
Yeah, that was fun. I remember, and the one that was the on Evan Hughes had I don't remember if it had it in the one on downtown, but and the one in Evan Hughes, whenever they would call, a light bulb would come on.
Nice, yeah, little red light thing.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. So do you feel that most of the topics that you guys talk about on the show, are they kind of focused to our community, like to our population?
Yeah, well, so, the first, it's like we've got prime directives, right? Everybody does, I guess. So our first prime directive is the show has to be about mental health. And that can include substance use disorders, or it can include so it's a behavioral health radio show. And we've learned that over the years where we would get kind of tangential. We'd get shows that were about similar topics, but when they would come in, they'd really dive into their topic without touching on mental health. And so after a few of those, we kind of were like, if we can't make it a mental health show, we're not going to do it, because basically the county is paying for the time. It's under mental health. So it's going to be mental health. Once that goes, then you look at the community and community mental health needs. We can look at our demographics and begin to see where we may have some advanced needs, some more significant needs. We were talking off air right before we came on about the initial lack of technology when the pandemic started. And that was something, in some upper class Orange County neighborhood, they weren't having that problem. Right. And so now our kids are failing at school because we are, behind the 8 ball of technology for a moment there. And I know we're doing a lot of catch up on that. Well, there's a lot of significant kind of mental health stuff there too. I mean, if you look at poverty is a mental health exacerbator. It makes mental health worse. You could be a rich person with a mental health problem there. It's 1 in 4 people have a mental health, treatable mental health disorder at any given time. It's 1 in 5 to 1 in 4, but let's say 1 in 4, because those other people are probably denying it. It could be rich, could be poor. It's across the board. It could be old, could be young. It's everybody. But then you throw poverty into that, right? Then you throw multi-generational abuse into that. Then you throw our lost stories of immigration that we can't tell anybody, right? You know, I was gonna I still someday. I had a friend who's a therapist, and we were going to do, and another friend who works at KXL. We were going to do kind of an electronic chant band, but we were going to call it Papeles Arreglados. and because spiritually, if you get your papers in line, you know, you should be able to, you know, step up to the next, you immigrate to cross the border into the next spiritual reign or whatever. And but so many of us are marked by that. You know, and so many of us are hit by poverty and hit by other things, and those things all exacerbate mental health.
Yeah, for sure. I was and in turn, you know, the same way I was trying to research, you know, I was looking up, you know, mental health and all these videos on YouTube, and yeah, like I was, you know, reading how and you know, there's a lot of rural towns that a lot of the times don't have any mental health care providers, that, you know, a lot of the times people who are dealing with mental health would rather get arrested so that they can go to jail and maybe get somebody in the jail to help them out with their mental health issues.
Sure. It is difficult. Well, and there's all sorts of different frames you could put on this that get kind of tricky. The first frame is the mental health system, the system of diagnosis, the system of treatment. That is a very Anglo system. You know, it came from white Europeans, period, the end. You know, it was not developed indigenously. They've got a whole different way of dealing with their mental health. It was not developed in African American communities. And through the years, it has been weaponized in some respects against those communities. You know, when we don't like what we see, we can just slap a mental health diagnosis on it, and then that person becomes marginalized and unable to kind of be who they are in the community. So there is that. I mean, we are fortunate enough here to be have a super majority of Hispanic, and that at least helps us in that regard, because, you know, one of the coolest things my department does is virtually all of our therapists were born and raised here and are bilingual and are Hispanic. And I am not going to tell you how important that is. It is critical because they have shared common experiences. You know, they know what it's like to be here in the summer. They know what it's like to be here with a teacher who says you can only speak English in this classroom. They know what it's like to grow up in hard places. And that makes them better therapists for this community by far. So you've got those challenges here, and they're deeper than just mental health. You know, one of the things about mental health that's it's like one of those, two-sided things, is that on the one hand, treatment and support from treatment is really useful and really helpful for some people. On the other hand, what you do for yourself is so important. So self-management and self-awareness and self-preservation and self-resilience, those become the really critical factors in terms of anyone's either recovery or maintenance in this, you know, COVID-driven madhouse that we've created them for ourselves. You know, it really is important. So on the one hand, you know, you want to say, hey, this is important. If you need help, get help. And many people need help. So that can't be discounted. But you also want to say everybody's got to really, the more you invest in your mental health, the better off you're going to be, regardless of whether you're having an easy life or a hard life, regardless of whether you've got some genetic link to bipolar disorder, or your parents were really abusive, or you've got, you know, your substance using to kind of cope with past trauma or whatever. If you self-manage, if you take responsibility for that and say, look, I'm going to do everything I can, and if that's not enough, then I'm going to get help. Those are the people who end up suffering less in the bottom line. So that's kind of how the show pushes towards. It pushes towards not only the support angles, but also a lot of what you can do for you.
Do you've been here in the Valley most of a long time.
Over 30 years.
Over 30 years. And our, like you said, our demographic is, mainly, Hispanic, Mexican Americans. And do you feel that our culture is not doesn't really see mental health for what it is. Like, we don't really take it serious as Hispanics. I mean, I feel like newer generations do, but like my parents, I don't know if they've ever had a conversation with me about depression or substance abuse or all these things that we face in our community.
I think it's a great question, and I think from my experience, I don't have data to back this up, so this is purely qualitative, subjective. But I grew up really multicultural, as I was telling you earlier. I grew up in my mom was working, so I grew up in an African American household. Okay, I grew up Black, and I grew up around LGBT, and I grew up, and I've been here in this community and a part of this community. My wife is Mexican, so of Mexican heritage anyway. And we speak Spanish at home, it's Spanglish, but we do it. But she was actually born in a migrant labor camp. So we are old school. And my 95-year-old mother-in-law, I was telling you off mic, but my 95-year-old mother-in-law lives with me. She's illiterate and only speaks Spanish, so I kind of had my feet in all these different worlds. And I could say this, I could say that the avoidance and denial of mental health is cross-cultural. Nobody wants to, and think about it from the standpoint of a parent. I know you got a kid. So if my kid is struggling, on the one hand, I can say, hey, let's go get some help and run on over to mental health, or I can stop it with my young teenagers or whatever and have conversations about mental health. That'd be really cool. That doesn't happen very often because as a parent, I carry this weird shame responsibility thing, right? So if my kids are somehow have a mental health disorder, what does that say about me as a parent? What did I do raising them? How did I expose them in whatever I exposed them to? So I think it's a really amazingly universal that we all try and put it in the closet, right? We all try to say, I'd rather blame God's will. I'd rather say, God is punishing me for this, and I need to accept that because that's what God does. Than say, hey, I've got depression, and there are some things I can do to manage this, and there are some supports I can get, but I actually have to come out and say I've got depression.
Yeah,
it's a tough pill to swallow. And what you see is people really trying to say, well, it's this or it's that. It's interesting in the mental health business because people will come in and for an intake assessment where they talk about what's going on in their lives and what they're presenting with and stuff like that. And they'll really sell depression, right? And you'll be talking to them. And I was doing a bunch of intakes when I was getting ready to be a therapist at one point. And they'll really sell depression like, well, I'm not feeling hopeless, and sleep and crying, all little earmarks of depression, right? And it's like a red herring in writing. It's like a false flag operation. Because, they're depressed. But why are they depressed? They're depressed because of this trauma that they've been trying to bury, that they don't want to talk about, and they don't want to acknowledge that it's screwing up their life today.
Yeah.
Because it's bigger and it feels indefeatable. And so they really want you to say, yeah, you're depressed. Go ahead and take these antidepressants or, do this little cognitive behavioral counseling gig and you'll be all better. And what happens is a lot of times with that group of people is they may find a little bit of relief in the moment, but ultimately until they go back and really work on the stuff that was causing the depression was the roots of it. And it can be family dysfunction. It could be all sorts of different things, until they get back and do that, then that's what, will bring them relief.
So you feel that one of the biggest or main reasons why, mental health issues or depression, all these things are kind of like a taboo kind of topic is because the people that are looking out for, like, for example, my son, if my son had mental problems, I would kind of like not want to find out because it kind of reflects on me, on how I or whatever I did to make this happen to him.
I think there's that element because as a parent, I'm responsible for my kid, right? Capital R, responsible for my kid, right? and I have to shield them from all harm. I mean, that's, I have to, and so as a parent, part of my maturation, part of my development as a human being is to say, is to get to the point where I could say, my children have their pathways, and some of the pathways may include mental health, and some of the things I've done may have made that pathway easier, may have not helped. But that doesn't mean I wasn't trying my best, right? That doesn't mean in the moment I wasn't doing what I had to do. I mean, a lot of us are living our own childhood adventures in our adult lives, right? We're trying to resolve the things that happened to us when we were kids that were caused by our parents trying to resolve the things that were happening when they were kids. So it's this big circle thing. And so if some of those things impacted our children, or and we don't know if they did, maybe they did, maybe they didn't, that kind of thing. Or many parents were pushed into mental health because they were trying to resolve the stuff that, had come from their family of origin, and they didn't have a good experience there. Mental health isn't as effective as unwinding those familial chains of disruption as, treating it straight attention deficit disorder. It's really good at it, straight attention deficit disorder. It's one of the ways you can tell if it's attention deficit. If it's attention deficit and you take the medication, you have a remarkable recovery. It solves the problem. If it's I'm distracted and impulsive and other things because I'm living in a very chaotic environment, that doesn't resolve as easily. And so yeah, I think that the parent acknowledgement is a tough pill to swallow. I will say as a parent that it always is a tough pill to swallow for me. Anytime my kids have some, and they're all grown ups, they're all like as old as you, but anytime they hook up with some distressing information and they call me, I have to stop and say it's not my fault. I have to literally because it blocks me from dealing with it. If I start, because I'll get defensive about it, right? I'll be like, well, it's not because of your upbringing. Well, maybe it is. I have to kind of just relax and say maybe it is, but I didn't know any better. Doing the best I could.
Do you feel that kids nowadays or people growing up with the internet and social media, have had a harder time, dealing or has it exaggerated their, mental health issues, and people in the past that really didn't have, this powerful tool in their hands?
I don't know. It's an experiment, right? I'm the oldest Generation X person. So I'm right on the cusp of baby boomers. And I know baby boomers, I've worked around them and lived around them my whole life. And they're like my older brothers and sisters, but I am not one of them. So even if I, regardless of how you figure birthdays, I definitely identify with Generation X. And because we were part of an experiment, we had working class parents. Everybody left us. They gave us a TV set, back in my day, we only had 3 channels, and when we were about 10 years old, we got our first microwaves and so we were an experiment, just like they were an experiment. And so did we, and we grew up in weird drug cultures and other things. So did we end up being all depraved? No, I really don't think so. I think Generation X is better balanced than almost any generation because we realized that we weren't going to get stuff. We'd already had, our whole lives, we've had little stuff taken away from us. And so when they say, well, no retirement for you, we're like, yeah, we already knew that. So what? It's hard to get us kind of reacting to stuff like that because it's happened so frequently to our generation. We were the generation of not getting as much as the generation before us. And so we're less entitled. I don't know what happened to millennials. Millennials kind of slip-slided on that one. But so I think Gen X actually relates really well to Gen Z, and Gen Z, if you want the iGen, those are the people who are really digital. And it's interesting that our brains, let me see if I get this right. The biggest part of our brain for my generation is, for when you look at the ruling of the hand, is the index finger. And for them, it's the thumb. So what's happened is there's actually been a developmental change in human brains based on digital technology. So their brains are developing different than mine. Now, I'm not ready to say, as somebody who's almost 60, it would be really easy for me to throw electronics under the bus, right? It's just kind of a natural kind of stay off my yard kind of grouchy old man response. And I'm not ready to do that. I see some of the magic that they do, the magic that the mixes they create in their music, the stuff that they do online, the photoshopping, it's just, I've always liked visual arts, and the stuff that they do with Photoshop is just amazing. And so I'm not ready to throw out the baby with the bathwater. It has this year been, this year's been an interesting test, because many teenagers who were all about the electronics are kind of sick of them now. And you hear lots of, some of them are completely okay still, but many of them that were very comfortable, texting people all day are like, oh God, I just want to see another human face.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. And going back to the, social media and the internet, do you feel that, cause we see a lot of, I guess, influencers or artists that are coming out and saying, I have.
Oh, you mean like Let's Talk About It, the radio show? Yeah, absolutely. Totally.
But do you feel that, having all these influencers or big names coming out and saying, I'm dealing with depression, I'm dealing with bipolar, substance abuse, does it help, lower
the stigma?
Yeah.
I see a change in this. I'm working directly with Southwest High School, and they've got a health professional HOSAs called Health Professional Club of kids that grow up to be health professionals. And their primary outreach the past couple of years has been mental health. They call it the Soaring Above Stigma program. And they've taken that into what basically is a school-wide wellness program that centers around behavioral health, because, the trick with holistic health is if you haven't got your behavioral health, you haven't got health. Behavioral health will take everything else down with it. Mm-hmm. So your mental health has to be good, or it ain't none of it's going to be good. So I've been working with that group of people, and the Active Minds Club at IBC, I work directly with them as well. Another student-led mental health coalition on campus. I see wonderful things with this generation because of their willingness. And I think they've been, they see how they're getting squeezed. They see how civilization and life and the expectations and everything else have so accelerated, have so pushed them that they're getting squeezed, and they're much more willing to talk about how it hurts, how it doesn't feel very good, and how that doesn't feeling very good can translate into stuff like depression or stuff like bipolar disorder, stuff like attention deficit or other types of panic attacks, anxiety. They seem to be much more open about it. And I think part of that is influencers coming out and saying, yeah, it's me too.
Yeah. I feel that because I talked to I have a niece, she's going to be 15, I believe. And I see how she follows a lot of influencers that, are open to talk about, issues like that, like mental health issues. And at the same time, like she'll share with my son who's only 12, or she'll have conversations with, while we're eating dinner or whatever. And she'll bring up some of the things that, her and her classmates talk about and deal with. And
wait. Time out. You guys eat dinner at the same table?
Yeah. How
many video monitors do you have surrounding that area that everybody can watch their own show?
They have them on their hands.
Yeah. No, but that's us too, right? We are as bad as they are. Let's face it.
Oh yeah, for sure.
But you guys have actual conversations. I want to go back to that because that's kind of a cool thing.
Yeah, I feel that, and that's something that I kind of wanted to ask, how. Because something when I was watching yesterday, I was watching a show about how poverty has made mental health worse for kids, especially because I feel that a lot of the times we as parents might talk about our problems, whether it's bills or losing your job. Do you feel that it's important for the parents to share these kinds of conversations? Or
yeah, that's a great question too, isn't it? It's interesting because there's like a couple of schools on this. One of the schools is that I don't tell my kids anything and they've got no idea what's going on. And I'm like, yeah, you know what? Your kids have nothing better to do than download you, especially now that they're all trapped in the same house, So if you think somehow that you can hide how you think or feel about the world, or if you can kind of give them the nice version of it and keep all the darkness inside of you, I think you're really sadly think about it back when you were a kid. Could you read your parents pretty well? Of course you could. We all can. So the idea that, we're somehow better parents than that, we can kind of hide that, is, I think, false thinking. It's kind of just going to run yourself into problems. But the other part is kind of goes back to the Jack Nicholson line in with Tom Cruise. It's like, you can't handle the truth. It's like, so there's a developmentally appropriate, if you will, line of transparency in family relationships. And so I think, pulling my kids into parts of it that are beyond their control could be a little bit disorienting, especially if I feel like I'm out of control, like with the bills. What are they going to do? Go out and get jobs? Mm-hmm. Actually, I did. I got a job when I was like 11 and I didn't stop working. I just added more jobs. At one point, I was like 6 jobs. I was like 19. I had like 6 jobs at the same time. I was a gig worker before it was cool. But because we were poor, because I grew up poor. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, I think you have to I think more importantly, you have to kind of value self-care, and you have to do that at the family level. So even if we're really struggling about money, it's about being kind to each other. Mm-hmm. It's about taking care of ourselves. It's about enjoying each moment as it was really precious, because we don't know how many moments we're going to get, right? It's like the whole thing could be yanked, right now we're 8 whatever earthquake, and you and I are going to watch the ceilings fall down on Zoom to bury us, and this show will never hit the air. That's kind of fatalistic thing. Echando sal, right? No, mm-hmm. You don't want to think you're not. That's ridiculous. Mm-hmm. But you want to live life as if that was going to happen, because it may, A, because it may, B, because it makes life so much more special. And ultimately, I think the wisdom of 60 years of age is that even if you live like veritably forever, like my 95-year-old suegra, it is over before you know it. It goes fast. And so you really want to grab as many of those moments and make those moments treasurable, and not by like making it splendor. You don't need a golden toilet. You want to make human connections. You want to, pet the dogs and cats. You want to, notice the trees growing. You want to breathe fresh air. You want to take all of these kind of embrace the moment kind of moments and make that your model as a parent, and make it not just for the kids, but for yourself. Mm-hmm. I think the bottom line for all of us is self-care. Everything you're doing has to be looked through in a lens of self-care. Is what I'm doing right now helping to sustain my development and my experience of being human? Some things don't do that. And standing in line at the DMV, for example, I don't know. There's lots of right. There's lots of examples of things that just plain old, I don't know, pardon my French, suck. And so you have to look at that. And if I've got a lot of those going on in my life, things that are just like going to the dentist kind of necessary icky experiences, then I have to balance that. That I really have to do extra steps to be kind to myself. So for example, people who were really extroverts, and I know them, but I'm not one of them. Yeah, me too. But some of them, I see them just really getting dragged through this pandemic, just in awful ways. Mm-hmm. They're either having to totally compromise whatever rules are going on so that they can get their social interaction, or they're denying themselves their social interaction, and they constantly tell themselves that they're suffering because they don't have people to talk to, in real life kind of things without masks. And those people, because they're suffering so much right now, they really need to do the self-care things that will take them away from that, that will help them. And for some, they've taken up cooking. For others, they've, reconnected to exercise. All of our dogs are getting walks now, which is really cool because, they weren't before. They were just leaving in the backyard, right?
Yeah.
And hope they survive the summer. Somebody check the water on them, that kind of thing. But nowadays we're reconnecting to that. The other thing they could do is they could start kind of questioning, why do I need this constant, I'm an introvert, so I'm going to call it noise. Why do I need this constant noise of human interaction? I mean, it's beautiful. It's marvelous. It's very cool. I get it. But why is it so necessary? Can't I be quiet? Can't I be still? Can't I be alone? What's threatening about that? Isn't it peaceful? Isn't it soothing? Isn't it like nice? So I that's another way of self-care that they can take. This situation has taught them something about themselves, right? It's pointed out that they're really dependent upon all these relationships. And they can say, do I want to continue this level of dependence? Is it healthy? Is it something that maybe if I could have the skills and the talents without quite as much desire, I could have a nice little balance of human relationships and value my quiet time, value my alone time, get up in the morning on a weekend and say, I don't have to go do something on a bucket list. I could sit on my porch.
Yeah.
And not burn carbon. Come on, guys. The planet's going to heck. You know what I mean? It's like you don't want to just go out and burn things and drive places just to see something, just to do something. It's like and a lot of that's consumer culture. I know going off on a little shift here, but consumer culture is really embedded in who we are as a civilization, embedded in who we are. We've always been buying stuff. It's all about Christmas. It's all about going places and spending money. And that creates a certain kind of person, and it creates a certain kind of pressure. And at some point it's nice to kind of look at that wheel and say, am I okay being on that wheel? I'm in a school lunch line with a $50,000 car because I can't afford food. Is that a problem? And it may not be. And if it's not, that's fine. I mean, it's everybody's got their own tickets to ride here, but it may be time to kind of downsize the priorities in terms of spending and upside the things that I can do without spending.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've got a hummingbird feeder. It keeps me entertained. I could spend like a week watching my hummingbird feeder.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've kind of picked up during the pandemic. Little things that I wouldn't notice before, like just watching my dog sometimes, like, and I think in the beginning of the pandemic, she was like, what the heck are you guys doing here all day? You guys need to go to work.
Well, no, the running joke is the dogs love it and the cats hate it.
Oh, yeah.
Cat's like, what are you doing in my house?
But you know what? My dog a lot of the times has this cat kind of vibe where
nice.
She'll kind of like be on her own, and then she'll come in and kind of like rub on your leg, kind of like for pets, and then she'll go do her own thing. And that's why, like in the beginning, I was like, she kind of like, she doesn't want us here all day. Like she'd rather be up there on her own and peace of quiet because we're watching TV or cooking or whatever, and she's like, guys need me.
I could be sleeping.
Yeah, I need some peace and quiet. go to work. But yeah, I mean, little things like that. Cooking as something that I've picked up that I've enjoyed doing and trying out, and hoping that my kid eats his vegetables hitting underneath the food I'm making and stuff like that.
Oh, one of those kind of parents are you?
Yeah. But going back to the show, who comes up with your topics, and do you guys look for guests and all these things? How does that come about?
Well, okay, so we have kind of a round table, if you will. So we have a monthly production meeting, but production doesn't stop at the meeting. The meeting is where you bring the ideas. So all month long, you're kind of digging for ideas. So if something happens in the news, for example, back when we were having, back when the first big ripples of gun control went through, and we were having lots of mass shootings, and it was something that had just gripped the consciousness of the nation. That was important for mental health because one of the buses that they were trying to throw under, people under to blame for this mass shooting thing was mental health. And No, it's kind of like sharks in the ocean. Sharks aren't dangerous to humans. Humans are dangerous to sharks. We kill gazillion times more sharks than they kill of us.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with mental health. Mental health people aren't dangerous to the community. The community is dangerous to them. Police kill many, 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 many more mental health people, as does isolation, as does marginalization, as does the community kind of not accepting them, than mental health people would ever harm any other people. No, mental health people are in distress, and sometimes distressed people do very dangerous things. But by and large, very much no. So we did a bunch of radio shows talking to people who were reviewing research. That's one of the things we try to do on the show, is we try to find stuff that is scientifically sound, isn't just kind of somebody's hype or somebody's feel about something. Although that stuff's important as well, because your feel is very valid, right? But we look for evidence, and so we did a bunch of evidence-based shows on guns and on people with guns and who was likely to be dangerous with guns. And we did that right in the moment. One of the tricks that we always have had is we really want to honor the Spanish show and the English show. So if, for example, we've had a bunch of leading authors, for example. But the trick is if somebody writes like a really good book and they're willing to come on the English show, you got to find a Spanish match. You got to be able to go out and hustle up some, and we were really lucky for a few years. I had some Spanish speaking therapists, and I would either buy a copy or get comped a copy of the book of the author in English, right? And I would give them the book and say, "Hey, read the book and do a Spanish show for me." And they would do it, and it was so cool because then you could really go out there and aggressively hunt down. We had Bessel van der Kolk. He wrote a book on The Body Keeps Score. It's probably still one of the top 10 Amazon psychology books, and it was the #1 trauma book forever. It probably still is. It was an amazing book. It was a very smart book about how the body marks your trauma, and later on when you're having physical problems, it's really related to traumas you experienced. Anyhow, we got him on the show and did an hour with him before NPR got 5 minutes of his time.
Oh, wow.
Because we were looking for it and we saw it come up, and it came up, and we talked to his publicist, and he was, we got Dan Siegel, who's he's a psychiatrist. So he's a medical doctor. He's also a psychologist, and he's the head of the UCLA Meditation Center. So he's done some incredible neuro work in his life. It's just amazing. He's a researcher. He's a teacher. He's a book writer. He's overall cool. We got him on to do 2 shows with us, and then he came back and did a Spanish show because we were saying, "Guy, I wish we had a Spanish show." He says, "Well, I'm learning Spanish. I'll come back on and do the show." So that we haven't done this, especially I think during the pandemic there's been some limitations, but we haven't done as many of that. For a while we were reaching really high for those shows and grabbing some top shelf stuff.
Oh, really? So you've had the opportunity to talk to people who are, big names at
the peak of their fields. Yes. At the peak of their field. Yes.
Wow. That's great. And, is there somebody that you've had the chance to talk that you kind of nerded out on?
Yes. God, I'm trying to remember her full name. She did, who should Google this, or she should take a break and go. Her name is Martha. And she wrote 2 books, one about bipolar and one about her eating disorder. And she's just an amazing author. And we got her to do a show. And I was so again, nerded out is the exact right thing. I was like standing. I was total stan. And so proud and very proud to do the show, because this is this person who had lived experience of being both bipolar and having a really serious eating disorder. Eating disorders are monsters. They are really tough. And she'd gotten through these things, and it was happening right as her celebrity hit as an author. So she was writing other types of books. And so we got her on the show and did a show. That was probably my #1 stand show. where I was just like, you know what? I had an interesting one. The guy who who painted the mountain out in the slabs, Ray. We had Ray on the show. He's in the dark archives. So I don't even have a CD of the show. But we drove out to Nyland one day at like 4 a.m. because we used to broadcast live. Okay. And so we would go on the air at 7:30 in the morning. And it would be over at 8:30. You know, those were the days, man, you missed it because you could say whatever you wanted to. It was live. And because it was gone. Once you said it, unless somebody was, with a tape recorder in their house, it was gone. Nowadays with podcasts, different place, man. Yeah. Got to watch what you say. Yeah. But, for sure. So we went out there and we got the guy who painted that mountain, Salvation Mountain, and brought him in at like 4 a.m. to get him there at 7:30 to do a show. It was an amazing show. He was transcendent. I don't know if you ever went up there and talked to that guy, but he was, God put him there and God told him to paint the mountain and he truly was an inspired human being. And that was a show. That was a show. We were all Maria and I and the producer, we just had this look and we were going, oh man, we are in the presence of God. Man. It is coming through this guy all over the show. And it was cool. It was very cool. I was gonna ask you. I had it right now and then it slipped away. Do you know your like demographic of the people who are tuning in? Yeah, that's a good question as well, and it is a complicated question. So I'm betting teenagers don't listen to us. We're just not cool enough. Sometimes we'll gear shows to them, and I'm just like, I realize that unless somebody forces you to listen, it's just not going to happen. So I'm betting that's not the demographic, but no, it is. So when they do radio surveys, they're very expensive, and they're also very general. So you rarely in the Valley, you rarely get information of, your top listeners are female, Hispanic, ages 21 through 35. You don't get that kind of a breakdown on stuff. Yeah. So what you end up with is the weird little back when Lucky's was open, and I'd go to Lucky's on Sunday morning, get my groceries, and I'd go in there, and the checkout lady, she'd say, "Hey, I was just listening to you on the drive to work this morning," and so I knew she was a listener. I had one of the things, the guys who cut hay have radios in their cabs, and so and they cut early in the morning, and so I would get like all these hay operators that would be like, yeah, I listen to your show every week. I'm like, yeah, that's so cool. So it's a really, I think it's probably a diverse and eclectic people because, how many of us go to sleep Saturday night with oldies on the radio and happen to wake up Sunday morning and we're still listening to KXL, and there's Scott and Maria. No, and I feel there's a specific group of us that like listening to talk radio. Not like I hardly ever listen to any music. I'm always listening to talk radio, even whether it's a podcast or actual radio. And it's funny because when I was growing up, my dad used to listen to talk radio a lot, and I was like, man, because we would drive to Mexicali almost every day, and like he would listen to it like every day. I'm like, man, who does this? Who listens to talk radio every day? And I bet my kids are the same way now because I hardly ever put any music on. And yeah, because to me, with my podcast, the people who listen to my podcast on Spotify, Spotify gives me like a little rundown of, who listens to my podcast, it's female, male, the ages, the countries where they listen from. So that's why I was kind of wondering if you guys had some kind of way to find out a little bit more information as who the demographic is of your listeners. Yeah, no, it's always kind of been frustrating for us, to be honest about that. So here, I got the author, I got the books, because I am such a stan. I went and looked it up while we were talking. It's Myra Hornbacher. Her name's Myra. It's like Mary with an A on the end of it. Hornbacher, and she wrote a book called Wasted. And that was about her eating disorder, and then she wrote a book called Madness: A Bipolar Life. Amazing author and just so real. You could feel it. It's just like Good writer, good story, perfect. And I'm a big reader. And I think, it's interesting. That's probably where most of my talk radio comes from, is reading. I was one of those kids that just happened to, reading was really easy for me. And that's the difference between somebody who reads and somebody who doesn't.
Yeah.
I read by paragraphs where other people try to, get words to make sense. The words just get swallowed up. I turn into the character. I forget about who I am. For me, it's a really good escape. It's easier than video, because when I'm watching video, the characters look like movie stars. When I'm reading the story, the character looks like me. You know what I mean? And I don't look like a movie star. So, there's that. But I think that's where talk radio really stood out to me, because talk radio is about, intelligent dialogue. And to me, that's always come from books. And so if you can recreate that in the moment, like you and I talking right now, that's always been so kind of like, that's the peak that you're trying to get to. Is can you get a flow going between two people, between two brains, between two ideas that writes itself, that's lyrical, that's poetic.
Yeah. And it's sometimes it seems easy, but there's times where like to me, like I do a lot of preparation for my interviews. I know the ones where I really don't have to do much, because like, for example, today with you, like I mental health is such a, has this big umbrella, like all these topics you can talk about.
Sure.
And I knew that I could bring just a few topics to you, and you would be able to talk to me for days. So like, I wasn't really like, but I did want it to be a little bit informed, because like I said, like we can talk about so many things about mental health, and but at the same time I could talk to you about, being on the radio, all these things, preparing for interviews, ideas, topics, and all these things that I could, relate to you because of what we do. But, the mental health part, I knew that you could handle. And like I said, I could bring a couple topics to you, and, you could talk for days. So yeah, like, and to me, like, I really enjoy having these conversations, because, I feel that, I don't know everything, but, I feel that the people that are listening are like me, and they're going to learn something, and they're going to hopefully, share with somebody else, and spread the knowledge. And I feel like that's something that you do with your radio show as well.
That's been one of my biggest pushes in the last couple of years, and last year in particular, is, look, this goes on a podcast. Somebody, you're the listener, somebody who needs to hear this. If you're listening right now, you're like, oh, dude, cousin Charlie needs to hear this. He's like totally. And so your job is to get that podcast to them. Now that it's digital, now that we can move stuff about, it's our listeners that have the most important job. And that is connecting to the people who need to hear it in the community. Let's Talk About It gets 1,500 downloads a month. And they're almost local. They're almost all local IPs. Mm-hmm. And we used to joke when we first got those numbers. We were like, yeah, well, we're teaching English to China because we enunciate very clearly on our radio show, and it becomes good teaching material. But no, it's almost all local IPs. So it's really staying in the community, and it's shared amongst the community. And that's kind of so what we do is, you put good stuff on tape, you put good stuff into that digital format. And then you hopefully get the people to share it, because I can't walk it over to everybody, so you need the community to share it.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's the goal,
Yeah. So Scott, we're at almost an hour and 10. And just to keep,
well, you were saying talk forever. I knew what that meant. I was like, oh, okay, I hear what he's saying here.
And I mean,
edit it down.
No. And to me, like, I could go on, but I feel that sometimes, like, going over an hour, like, people kind of like.
No, absolutely. I totally. We do an hour on my show too. So let's you and I promise to stop this now. If you get overwhelming listener response, and you want to hit it again sometime.
Yeah, for sure.
More than happy to do that for you.
I will be more than glad to have you on again, and talk some more about some of the mental health issues going on in the community, and just promote mental health and make it not big of a stigma as I guess it still is, and even though it shouldn't. That's my goal, like kind of like make sure that the community knows that, mental health is it's something that we should look
we all
down
have
upon.
it. Okay.
Yeah.
We all have mental health. And because of that, we all have to protect our mental health.
Mhm.
We all have to take care of our mental health. We have to take care of it in our people that we love and even in the people that we don't like. Why would we mess up their mental health? Because the thing is, it's catching. You put one depressed person in a room and everybody gets a little bit bummed out.
Mhm.
So the idea is that we support each other, we hold each other up, and we realize that it's part of life. It's you're going to have challenges. Promise.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Scott, thank you once again. I'm glad that we made this connection and we finally talked, because it kind of like we've been going back and forth on email.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of glad that, and I feel that sometimes when I email new people, they kind of don't know me and they're like, what is this guy all about? So they kind of like, once they talk to me, they feel a bit more comfortable, and they're more.
You're saying I can take the restraining order off? Is that?
Yeah. You can block me off you can send me back to your inbox instead of the junk mail. But yeah,
Nice.
I really appreciate the time and the conversation. I really hope that we can do this again.
Hey, when Netflix wants to make this a miniseries, Scott and Jose, I'm in it. Let your people call my people, and we will do that. We could make this an entertaining hour, once every couple of weeks or so.
Yeah, for sure. So tell us, before we leave, tell us where people can listen to Let's Talk About It, and when, and all the good stuff.
I've got this memorized, amazingly enough. All right, let's talk about it. You broadcast Thursday mornings on KUBO 88.7 at 8:00 in the morning. If you're into Expressate, it's 8:00 in the morning on Wednesday mornings on KUBO 88.7. If you're a weekend person, all you got's English. Weekend person, it's 7:00 in the morning on Sunday, KXO 1230, and then 7 p.m. on 107.5 KXO FM. The podcasts, both of them, English and Spanish, are available at the Let's Talk About It link at kxoradio.com. Click on the link, click on Let's Talk About It. You can search archives. We've got archives down, I think, back to about 2014 on there. So not the deep archives, but there are a lot of really, really, really good shows in there. So, and that's actually, if you want kind of a less threatening place to explore mental health, like you're worried about something, you could just go in there and dive into the archives and do kind of a scroll search and find the show that has to deal with it, because we've done all the shows. And listen to that and kind of make up your mind to go what you want to do next after hearing the show.
Yeah,
it's a good place to start.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for listening or watching. Thank you, Scott, once again. All right, guys, make sure you stay safe, wear your face mask, wash your hands.
And we love our sponsors, so make sure and take care of our sponsors for us.
Yeah. So social distance, stay safe, and we'll see you guys in the next ones.